Back at the start of May, I set myself the challenge of trying to achieve a net negative energy bill for the month. I then posted weekly updates just for my channel members so as they could see my results unfold as the challenge progressed. Well, this video is a compilation of those weekly updates so as everyone can find out how I got on and the highs and the lows that I hit along the journey. So I've had my solar panels and batteries for over 3 full years now, but in that time I have never had a negative energy bill for a month. I've had the odd day here and there where my export has offset my import, but normally a car charge or something like that gets in the way of it. But at the end of last year, my export rate almost doubled to 15p per kilowatt hour from 8.5p. I've also got rid of my gas meter too, so I don't have to pay the gas standing charge. So I think I'm in a much better position to get my first ever negative energy bill month. This is my solar payback spreadsheet that you might have seen in my 6 monthly update videos. If we look at May and June last year, you can see that May's actual cost was £41 and June's was £55. That doesn't include the standing charges, so we can add maybe £20 on top of each of those figures. But look at the export for June, it was £42. So if we say that last June my bill was £75, minus the £42 export, that's £33. If my export was almost doubled to about £72 and I took off about £7 for the gas standing charge, then all of a sudden that bill might have been minus £4. And that got me thinking, can 2025 be the year of my first negative energy bill? I reckon May or June are the best months for this, so I'm going to see if I can game the system a little bit. I know a lot of you are probably already doing this and you could use something like Predbat to fully automate this for you if you wanted, but what I've done is create a couple of automations. This is for my all-in-one. If it's been a sunny day, then it'll probably be quite full late in the evening. So at 11 PM, it'll check to see if I've got at least 80% charge and then dump to the grid at full speed for an hour. That will drop about 40% of the capacity, or just over 5 kilowatt hours. I'm only going to make about 5 pence per kilowatt hour on that realistically due to the overheads, but I'm hoping that's enough to tip me over into the negative bill territory. I'm also doing a similar thing with my 8.2 kilowatt hour AC3, dumping another 2.5 kilowatt hours if there's spare a bit earlier on in the evening. I'm using a new fancy dashboard card on my Green Tech dashboard to keep an eye on my daily costs, including the standing charge. There will be a whole video coming out on that in a couple of weeks if you want to see how I created that. We're off to a bad start in the first couple of days in May with a cost of 71 pence for the first day, and the second day is looking a bit dull and grey at the moment. But I will give you another update in a few days' time to let you know how I'm getting on. See you soon. Time for an update then after the first week of trying to see if I can get a negative energy bill this month. Spoiler alert, I'm not doing very well if I'm honest, so obviously I've gone and stuck all of the data into a spreadsheet so as I can make some nice fancy graphs. I'm tracking my net bill each day in the blue column, which is provided by the Octopus Energy integration in Home Assistant. This is the important number. I thought I'd also track the import and export costs each day too, using the monitored energy data and multiplying that by the tariffs that I've got in place for it. That's the red and the green columns. This does not include the daily standing charge, but I have included that in the grey column, which is acting as a bit of a sanity check for the data in the blue column. You can see it pretty much tallies between the two monitoring methods. I've then also recorded how much solar I generated that day, just in case that turns out to be useful later on. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed the running total at the top of that spreadsheet. Yes, the total bill at the end of the first week is £2.59. So yeah, it's not negative, but it's not a massive bill at all either really, and there were a few obstacles in my way. Firstly, we did a bit more driving than normal, so we had to charge the car more, but also the temperature dropped a lot and the heating has gone back on. If we look at the daily import versus export graphs, you can see it was quite reasonably balanced. We had a really expensive 6th of May for import, but because export was quite close, the difference wasn't too bad. The 4th of May had the biggest gap between import and export, and you can really see that on the net bill graph. We had 3 negative days in the first week, but sadly that wasn't enough to offset the positive days. So I've had a look at the weather forecast for the week ahead, and it's looking mostly very warm, which should mean the heating isn't needed, but there are a few days of rain which will really limit how much I can export. Hopefully the rain will clean the panels and improve the output for the days after that. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next update. Another week, another update on my negative energy bill challenge. So this week I decided to increase the nightly forced export of my all-in-one from 1 hour to an hour and a quarter, which should give me another 1.5 kilowatt hours of exported energy. I might increase that to an hour and a half if it looks like I'm easily finishing with spare capacity. I have to be careful not to run out totally then, because if I draw from the grid at peak rates, then I could potentially mess up days of effort. So you can see that we had a strong start to the second week. Export income was more than import costs for 3 days in a row from Thursday to Saturday, and then on Sunday we charged the car and the cloudy weather started drawing in later in the afternoon. It really is charging the car that gives us the expensive days, because you can see that again on Tuesday. Despite generating 19 kilowatt hours of solar energy on Tuesday, there wasn't enough export either from solar or from the forced discharge of my batteries to make that day profitable. Looking at the net bill graph, you can see those brilliant first 3 negative days, followed by the whopping costly 4th and 6th days, ending on a very decent negative day on the Wednesday. 5 negative days in a week though is good going for me, I think. But what has that done to our running total for May? Well, our net bill overall for May so far is £1.68. Okay, still not a negative bill, but we have a couple more weeks to go in May, so we've still got everything to play for. We have some really sunny days coming up for the next week according to the forecast, with solar generation predicted to be around 25 kilowatt hours almost every single day. So I'm hoping for great things in the next update. See you next week. It's time to mix things up a bit with some new graphs for this update. On the whole, it has been a really sunny week, which is great for reducing those daily bills. If you remember, I was also tracking my daily solar generation for this challenge, just in case it proved to be useful or interesting. Instead of the daily net bill chart I was showing you before, I've decided to plot the data on a line graph instead. Same data, but I think this shows it a little more clearly. You can see that I had 4 days of negative bills this week on the 16th, 17th and 18th, and the best day of the whole month so far on the 20th with a whopping negative bill of £1.90. I've overlaid my solar generation for each day on this same graph, and you can see that there is a rough correlation between high solar generation and lower energy bills. You can see that these 3 sunny areas here which sort of mirror the low or negative energy costs for the same period. There are of course anomalies, like here on the 15th where we had to charge the car. We probably had the washing machine on a lot that day too, and our solar and battery capacity just isn't enough to offset that totally. And then we have the very last day of this week, which was a perfect storm of needing to do a full charge on the car. The dishwasher didn't turn on overnight, so we had to run it during the day instead off the battery, and it was raining pretty much all day. That means it was an expensive day. But look, this isn't about getting a negative bill every single day. This is a game of averages, and the idea is to end up with an overall negative bill by the end of the month, which leads me on nicely to the second new graph. This is the running total of my monthly bill so far. You can see that mostly it has stayed in the red half of the graph, which means I have a bill to pay, but 4 times so far it has dropped below 0 into the green section, and if it stays there by the end of the month, then Octopus Energy will owe me money in my next bill. Unfortunately though, you can see that the very last expensive day has just kicked me back up into the red. And that means that my total bill for May at the end of the 3rd week stands at £1.08. We still have 10 days left of this month though, so anything could happen. Honestly, the weather forecast isn't looking amazing, so I think it's going to be a tricky target to hit, but it wouldn't be a challenge if it was easy. The next update from me will be in June then, once we have the full data for May. I didn't think there was any point doing an update next Thursday and then again a couple of days later. So hopefully join me a week on Sunday to find out if I managed it. See you then. That's May all over and done with. Has it really been a whole month already? It's flown by for me, but the important thing I'm here to answer today is, did I manage to get a negative energy bill in May? Well, let's get a bit of tension for the result like they do on X Factor. Actually, let's do the result at the end and look at some data first. So over the last few weeks, we've learned that the two biggest influences on my daily energy costs are when I charge the car and our solar generation. And if we charge the car and there's not much sunshine that day, then our daily costs will be quite high by comparison. If we look at my solar generation, then most of the month was pretty decent for the weeks I've already given you updates on. But these final 10 days were a real mixed bag. We started with two very sunny days on the 22nd and 23rd, but after that it went downhill. Lots of rain, overcast skies and even fog at one point. I took that opportunity to go outside in the rain and clean some of my easier to reach solar panels, just in case removing the slight layer of green muck on them made any improvement to their generation. Spoiler alert, it didn't make any noticeable difference at all. If we now overlay my net daily energy costs over the top of that, you can see that those first two sunny days actually resulted in a negative cost. But the 27th was so poor that we had our most expensive day of the month so far, if you ignore the 31st, which is high for another reason that I'll talk about at the end. It's worth adding too that this month was actually one of my best ever solar generation months, producing 583 kilowatt hours, which is second place to May in 2023, which managed 596 kilowatt hours. This is the running net bill graph with the last 10 days hidden for dramatic effect. So basically, if you've been following this series of videos, then you'll already have seen this data already. We ended the last video with my bill jumping slightly into the positive. Let's reveal a little bit. The next 2 days and we're back to a negative bill. At this point, Octopus Energy would owe me money. So let's start that tension music again. Was there enough sunshine to offset my usage? Does Octopus Energy owe me money this month? Can I annoy my viewers by stringing this out any longer? That's a no to all of those. The weather was rubbish and my bill just shot right up. You can see how the weather made such a massive difference to the challenge though, and just a few days of rain sticks me with a bill to pay. Of course, we need to remember that without solar panels and a battery, my bill would have been massively more expensive, so I can't really complain. Well, I can and I will, because that's all part of the challenge that I set myself. If we look overall at the numbers, the cost of the energy I imported in May, including the daily standing charge, was £109.94. My exported energy earned me £98.37, and that means that the total energy bill for May comes out at a very reasonable, but not negative, £11.57. But you know what that means, right? We have to do this all over again in June. Yay! So I'd kind of figured I hadn't met my goal a couple of days ago, so decided to charge the car on the last day of the month. And we also did all of our laundry on the last day too, just to make sure that we got a good start on the 1st of June. I also didn't drain my batteries with a forced export on the last day, so there's less to put back in on that first day of this month too. So I guess I'll see you next weekend for the first update of the second month. See you then. Before we continue with June, I just want to remind you to give the video a like if you're enjoying it, and please make sure you're subscribed for free too. And if you're not already with Octopus Energy and are considering switching suppliers, then please use my referral code that's on the screen right now, or visit speaktothegeek.co.uk/energy. I am currently on the Octopus Go tariff, designed for charging your EV overnight at a cheap rate. But there are smart tariffs for all sorts of different scenarios, so you're bound to find one that works best for you. And Octopus are a Which recommended energy provider for 8 years in a row. If you use my referral code or link, then once your switch has completed, we'll get £50 of account credit each as a thank you. Anyway, on with the story and the results after the first week of June. Okay guys, it's month 2, week 1, and honestly, it's not been a great start. I'm feeling a bit fed up now, like, will I actually manage this challenge? Well, it got me thinking, if I hadn't got the EV, would I have had a negative bill last month? So I looked at all my data in Home Assistant, and for May I used 390.8 kilowatt hours charging the car. Now all of that was done off peak using the Octopus Go tariff at 8.5 pence per kilowatt hour. The cost of charging the car in May was therefore £33.22. Because my net bill for May was £11.57, had I not had to charge the car, my net bill would have been minus £21.65. Obviously, if I hadn't been charging the car, then I wouldn't have been able to drive anywhere, or I'd have had to have used the diesel car, which would have cost me even more in fuel. So while I might have completed the negative bill challenge, overall it would have probably cost me more. But anyway, the first week of June, how did I get on? Well, solar generation was mostly okay. Not amazing though, with most days producing under 20 kilowatt hours. This meant we started off well with a couple of negative days, but due to a long drive I took midweek, we used a fair bit of energy charging the car. So the result of that is we don't have a negative bill at the end of the first week, and we're sitting with a cost of £2.21 that we have to hope the rest of the month can offset for us. I've looked at the weather forecast for the next 7 days and it seems to change every hour, so I'm not going to even bother making a guess this week. Let's just see how it goes. I'll catch you next week, guys. Yeah, it's not going well, but I'm too far into this challenge to stop now. Might as well play this out and look at the stats for the last week. Solar wise, it hasn't been too bad, but only one day was above 20 kilowatt hours. It was overall quite low generation really for this time of year. On Friday, we even had torrential rain and thunderstorms. And then if we look at the daily net bill, then you can see we only had one negative day this week, which was yesterday. So you can't really have a negative bill overall if you don't have negative days. I've decided to bring back another graph that I was using at the start of this challenge, the import versus export graph. But this time I've included the standing charge in the import costs. I was looking at the older graphs I did without that and thought that makes no sense and is difficult to understand. I don't know why I left the standing charge out. I did that on purpose too for some reason, but that reason has been lost to time. Anyway, here are my import versus export costs for each day, and what you really want to see is the green line taller than the red line every day. But we don't get that, do we? There's a lot more red than green. And all of this means that my bill for June is just growing and growing. I currently owe Octopus Energy £8.20 for June, and with 2 weeks to go, I'm going to need it to be extremely sunny pretty much every single day in order to make that up. So it's really going to take a miracle for me to get a negative month in June, or even beat May's results. And there's a chance Octopus Energy might be supplying that miracle, because they sent me an email earlier this week. They are bringing back their free electricity sessions for the summer, so if by some pure luck they arrange a few of those in the next 2 weeks, then I should be able to take advantage. I can discharge the batteries before the session, charge during the free session, and then export again. With a fair wind of good weather and several free energy sessions, that could be enough to tip the results in my favour. Let's see what the next week brings us. Catch you next Sunday. So the past week has included the warmest and sunniest days of the year so far, with the UK experiencing a heat wave. But unfortunately that heat doesn't necessarily translate into increased solar generation. So yes, we have had a fair amount of energy from the solar panels, but they are less efficient when they get hot. And we didn't have any days at all this week where we generated more than 25 kilowatt hours. But despite that, we still had a fair few negative bill days, with only 2 days actually costing us money, and one of those was the day that we charged the car. Now I have a theory on why we managed so many negative days this week. My daughter has gone on holiday. We've hardly had to charge the car at all this week, and usually we're ferrying her around all over the place. And because we're not doing all of that extra mileage, we're saving money on charging the car. Here's the import versus export costs graph then, and as you can see, for the last week we're getting lots more lovely green than red for most days, which is what we want to see. And then my running total bill for the month so far looks like this. There's a good downward trend now, chipping away at the balance that had built up previously, and we've ended the week with a balance of plus £6.06. Quite a way to go then to get a negative bill, but not impossible. One thing we haven't had yet are any of those free electricity sessions that Octopus teased us with, and as luck would have it, the first one of the year is actually today at 2 p.m. I'm recording this on the morning of Sunday 22nd of June, so later this afternoon I will get 1 hour of free electricity for any energy I use above what I normally use. My house normally runs on batteries, so my normal grid use is 0, which means basically anything I use in that hour from the grid is free. I've created this automation to help me out a bit. I haven't tested this yet, so today is its first trial run. This automation will trigger firstly 2 hours before the saving session starts, it'll then trigger 1 hour before the saving session, and finally at the exact time of the saving session. If we look down at the actions, I'll scroll down a bit, 2 hours before the save-in session starts, it will discharge my AC3 battery to the grid for 1 hour. Then 1 hour before the session starts, it will then export the all-in-one to the grid for an hour. This will earn me a little bit more in export and make sure there's enough room in the batteries for when the free session starts, which I've called blast off just here. When the session starts, the automation will force charge both batteries for the hour, which should basically put them back to the same level of charge they were at before the session. I then boost the hot water to make sure that it's as warm as possible, and then I tell the car to start charging, which means I do need to remember to plug that in before this starts. That's the plan anyway. Hopefully there will be more of these sessions before the end of the month, and if there are, then we might be able to complete the challenge. The next update will be the final update, so I'm going to leave you in suspense for a little bit longer than normal. I'll update you at the start of July and you'll find out whether I managed it or not. See you then. It's the final update of the challenge then, but I'm obviously going to string this out unnecessarily for as long as possible. So let's start by talking about the free electricity session and that automation that I created to help me manage it. To recap, the idea was that I would automatically discharge my batteries starting 2 hours before the session begins. I'd discharge my AC3 first and then discharge my all-in-one, making some space ready to charge them both at full speed for the hour-long free session. I'd also boost my hot water tank and charge my car too. But I had overlooked something critical: the sun. It's quite easy to forget about the sun when you live in Wales because you don't actually see it very often. The problem is my DNO export limit, which is 5 kilowatts. The free session was at 2 PM, which meant that my AC3 would start exporting 3 kilowatts at midday, but the all-in-one would export at 5 kilowatts, which is limited from the 6 kilowatts it can do. However, it was quite a sunny day and I was already exporting solar at about 2 kilowatts. Well, you can see the maths doesn't add up for me to be able to keep within my 5 kilowatt limit there. Looking back, what I needed to do was dump the all-in-one much earlier in the day before the solar panels really got going. Probably the AC3 as well, just to make certain. So what I ended up doing was disabling that automation, doing a manual export but for a longer period at a lower discharge rate. Just before the session started, I then re-enabled the automation so it could deal with the batteries being force charged and the car charging and the hot water and stuff. All in, I managed to use an estimated 14.265 kilowatt hours of energy during the hour-long session, and I am hoping to receive a credit of £4.16 once the final results are in. I have included the £4.16 credit in my calculations for that day, even though it will take a couple of weeks to arrive in my account. And then on the very last day of the month we had a saving session, or DFS as they're officially called. With a saving session you are supposed to use as little energy as possible and get paid for that. Because of my batteries I can't actually use any less, but what I can do is export. Now I was exporting anyway later that day, so I just brought that forward by a few hours. I exported about 5 kilowatt hours in that hour, so I earned an extra 65 pence for my export. So did that help me with my challenge? Let's take a look at the graphs for one last time. Solar generation wise, these last 9 days were not brilliant. I had hoped for it to be a bit sunnier than it was, which is disappointing. Plenty of rain though, so my lawn is growing like crazy. Showing the net daily bill on the graph, you can see that the free electricity session gave us a nice negative bill that day, and topping up the car and hot water probably helped with the negative bill the following day too. But after that it was downhill, or uphill for the bill I guess. I did manage an exactly zero value bill for one day though. It's not negative, but it was still extremely satisfying to see a spot on zero bill for a day. Okay, let's cut to the chase. Did I manage a net negative bill in June? Well, I think you've already probably guessed the answer, haven't you? But let's go through the motions anyway. Here's my running net bill for the month, and yes, it's ended very clearly in the red. It tried hard to come down mid-month, but even the free session wasn't enough to battle against the lack of solar generation. So yes, my net bill for June 2025 is £7.95. That's still slightly less than it was for May, but not negative of course, which was the point of this challenge. And I know I can't complain really about that because it's still a really low energy bill for a whole month. Keep in mind that also includes all of our car charging, so running the electric car we don't have to pay for petrol or diesel on top of that, which means that is an absolute bargain. But still, it would have been nice to get a negative bill. Well, that's the end of the challenge for this year. Looking at past data, I think it's unlikely that I'd manage to get a negative bill in any other months of the year, unless something drastic happens with my energy tariffs. If there are any big changes like that, then we shall revisit the challenge, but as it stands, I'll probably just try this again next year. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon. I guess I'll be doing this all over again next year then. Anyway, I just need to say a massive thank you to these guys here. They're my channel members and patrons, and they got to see all of these video updates weeks ago, only a few minutes after I'd finished recording them. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member or a patron, then check out the links down in the description. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.